Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wild Woman. So in this episode, I'm going to share some of my own personal story. I mentioned this in the trailer that I did for this podcast. And what I intend to do, this will change, obviously, and evolve as I will, as I'm developing the podcast. And I would also, though, ask you, please do give me feedback if you're watching or listening on Spotify or YouTube. Do please drop a comment if something resonates, if you would like to hear me talk about a particular topic, if you have some feedback to give in general. I really would love to hear from you. This is a new venture from me, as you will know if you've been listening to any of the episodes so far. So what I'm intending to do, I'll repeat a little bit just in case you didn't hear the trailer, is I intend to interview, and I am interviewing, a variety of women from all over Ireland, from all around the world, women I have been lucky enough to get to know, or at least have connected with and am getting to know, or women I really want to get to know and I admire and look up to and just feel connected and aligned with. And that is very much the guiding force for the conversations that I'll be having. And what I hope is that by having these conversations, it will feed into this topic of wild woman, returning and living as an autonomous, sovereign woman who is connected to her ancestors, her true nature, her spirit, her power, her excitement, her joy, everything, and is living in a very authentic way in this world. And I really want to hear, I think it'll be very valuable for me and for all of us to hear, the story, what the journey has been like. What has it been like, firstly, to discover that there is such a thing as this wild woman nature within all of us, within all women? And what has it been like to get to that place where you actually recognize it exists? What has the journey been like? What are the challenges, the ups, the downs? What are the lessons? What is the wisdom? What are you doing with it now? How does it make you feel? How are you impacting the world and society and humanity through recognizing and living from this truest part of yourself, living completely and entirely and honestly as yourself, whatever that is, in every single moment. To me, there is no greater way to live, and it's the journey I'm on. So in this episode today, the episodes where I share, I keep them a little shorter. I think they are inspired out of something that is sort of rising up in me, or something that I feel I want to share. I may come back to the topic again. It's not sort of a linear structure to this. I feel it's sort of very cyclical, and like our lives, cyclical and a rhythm. And with each cycle, we're going deeper, into the truth of who we are, into our essence, and releasing and going beyond and letting go all of what we believe we are through just being a human being on the planet and growing up in a culture, a society, a family, and also carrying our own, I suppose, wounds, karma, maybe from past lives. That's something very strong and true in me. It may or may not be something you identify with, but it can be wounds or experiences just from life that can leave their mark. And unless we allow and heal from those and process them, we hear so much talk about healing, and it's important. Processing, I like that word as well, because processing is what facilitates healing. And yes, the memory may be there, but it doesn't have the same charge. Like, when you heal a wound on your arm physically or wherever, and that heals over, the scar is there to remind you of what you've learned maybe from that. but it's not necessarily paining you and bothering you in the way that you did, but it is, you've learned and you've been strengthened by it. That's how I see it. So, all of these layers and patterns, that's what I mean. They're sort of generally disguising who we truly are. I speak in the podcast honestly from my own experience. I read a lot, I research a lot, I watch a lot of other people, because I just always have a hunger and a thirst to learn more, but not so much in an intellectual way. It's often not even to reassure, but it's almost reflecting where I'm at in my own experience, because I think the greatest learning is through experience. Otherwise, it's just knowledge, information there, but it hasn't been brought alive. So we can take all that knowledge, but it's how we live it, and it changes us, and that those changes benefit us and benefit the world and contribute to the greater evolution of humanity and the awareness of who we really are, spirits, beautiful spirit in a physical body. And that's definitely my experience, and that's what I've been awakening to in my life and continue to, because I don't think there's a destination as long as you're alive, other than going deeper and deeper and deeper into the infinite, which by its nature is infinite. So yeah, and sometimes we don't have, and I don't have words often for the extent of what I'm experiencing inside and the beautiful states that I can feel and be in. It sometimes feels it's not even, maybe it's not even, I'd say appropriate is the wrong word, but you just can't put words on. But what I want to share is my journey into a life as well of fulfillment and meaning and joy and ups and downs today. So I've already been talking for quite a while, I think. I can't see the time on this, but that's really not the point. I'm digressing there. So forgive me if you listen to me. You'll get to know that I something I've learned through my study of astrology is I have Mercury in Aquarius as well as Venus, and it does explain to me sometimes how a lot of information can come in at once. It's almost like whoop, and I sort of navigate and try to navigate that sort of sea of information that comes to me, and it can lead me to move around in when I'm speaking, but I hope that doesn't distract you, the listener. And obviously, as I develop and do more of these podcasts and use my voice, because that's another area that has been, let's say, I'm healing or have been healing, is the use of my voice, and it's something I love to do, and it's actually very important for my own energy flow. I feel that when I use my physical voice and learn to project it from deep in my solar plexus, or where it's originating. But today I just want to take a few minutes specifically around sharing a little about what my journey with breast cancer has meant. I'm not going to spend a long time talking about it today. There's just an aspect I want to talk about and share it. Like all of our lives, we're not just one box that's that. They all weave together. And there's something that's not just about cancer today, but I just want to share this, and I'm sure in other episodes it'll come up in different ways, as will other aspects and experiences in my life. And my purpose in sharing this, I'm not looking for sympathy or, and I mean that in a what would I say, in trying to be in an empowered way. I'm sharing because it's experiences that have changed me in an absolutely just hard to describe, but in a really positive way that I could never, ever have imagined when I was going through any dark experiences. I have had others, like I'm sure you have, And the reason, as I said, I want to share them is to share what I've learned, share my story, be open, be honest, be vulnerable, to grow through sharing, but to help you grow through sharing, because this, I think, is how we all evolve and cope with our lives and our challenges, is knowing we're not alone. And, you know, you can see someone looking very happy. We all know that, walking on the street. And maybe they're dying inside, because I know that is how I felt many times in my life. But I got a better actress as time went on. Rather than dealing with what was happening, I did what I could to survive. So I have stories around, you know, marriage breakup, IVF, failed IVF attempts. Imagine, I'm not going to go into that today, but that I forgot until somebody was sharing that with me recently. I went, oh, I went through that. Don't know if I blocked it out or forgot. Addiction, which I've mentioned before, which plagued my life for quite a while. And shows up in different forms. It's amazing. Like, it isn't all, you know, there's so many forms it takes. Isolation, cancer, illness, grief, you know, all of those. So I'm going to be talking about each different aspects as and when the time feels right. Today, as I said, and I am getting to the point, I'm sharing a bit about the cancer experience. So what brings me to it is, I was thinking this morning about a TV show that I absolutely adored when I was a child, and it was Born Free. Now, for any of you who are younger than me, I am 55. You may or may not remember it, but it was a book, I think, originally, and it is based on the true story of, I think, a Swedish woman called Joy Adams, who ended up living in Africa on I suppose a safari, or out in the wilds with her husband. And it's just a little analogy, and it came to me. I had to, when I was launching my second book, Gifts from the Devastation, which is my story about cancer, or my journey through life, and I suppose, what led me to cancer, and then the transformation that took place and continues to take place after. So I was preparing to speak at something, and I was finding it very difficult to, like, where do I focus? What do I talk about? There's so much. This often is what happens. So analogies, metaphor always really helps me. But what came was, I thought back to when I was a child, and I was asked in school, or we were all asked in school, what is your favorite, or what do you want to be when you grow up? And all I could think of, I think I said Joy Adams. I don't know if I remembered her name, but the woman in Born Free. And I never understood why I said that. Isn't that interesting? You know, and it is my passion now. And I think it is a passion for many people on the planet. We want to live free, sovereign lives, as is our birthright. And yeah, it's been quite challenging if you've chosen that path, which I hope many of us have. But it's interesting, I thought of that TV show. And then I started thinking, why is that coming up in me again? I was very young, but obviously something very intuitive, because I know I was when I was a very young child. I know I felt a lot. I know I blocked a lot out, because I sometimes find it difficult to go back even and remember aspects of my life when I was that young. What I sense and know now is that at that very young age, maybe 5 or 6, I can't remember, there was a very strong knowing that I was born free. And I identified, I think it wasn't so much, maybe an element of it was, this woman was living out in safari and rescued a lion, and she was free. So some part of me really identified with that. So, sorry, you can bear with me. This story is leading to the cancer piece. But yeah, so that's where that idea, or that memory, came up to me again. So I was thinking, yes, Born Free. So I knew that. And I started thinking about why the TV show was called Born Free, because this lion, little cub, was born free. This is the story that is the TV show, was born free. Its mother died. Joy Adams and her husband adopted the little lion cub, took her in, I think, Elsa was her name. Yes, it's coming back to me. Looked after her. So, and then I just traced this. So what happened was they looked after her. After a number of years, they realized she can't live like this. Like a lion isn't, they did their best to raise her when her mother died, but, you know, a lion isn't designed to live like this. But they knew we can't just throw her out into the wild. She's been years, you know, living with us. So there was a process of returning her to the wild. And ultimately, she went on to live free, I think, in the plains of Africa again. And as I thought about it, I said, my God, that is such an accurate image or story of my life, and maybe the life of every human being. We are born free. We do become domesticated or captured, is another word I like to use. In what I mean is in from going from living and knowing who you are as a spirit with free and knowing that you are. We come in as a little human being into the world, and then we're educated and we come into a culture and we're told you can't do this, you can do this. This is the way to learn. This is what you must do for a career. And I'm not saying it's all awful, but you know, you start to see that we become very domesticated because we're free spirits and we come from something infinite. And of course, as a child, I didn't know this, but I do remember feeling as I grew up, I don't fit in. I found it very hard. I felt everything almost was like I had to learn what this human thing is and struggle. And I was shy and I was sensitive and all of that. And so to me, that is the next stage. That's, you know, when the little lion cub becomes domesticated. That's what happens to us. That's what happened to me. So this is the story that I was using to tell at the book launch. And I'm sort of repeating it here because I just want to focus in on the next aspect is when Elsa the lion was returned to the wild. It was a process. And I just remember reading about that. They couldn't just go, okay, this isn't working for her. If we throw her out, she won't survive. And I started to think, even though I think that sort of happened to me, I was sort of thrown out. So there I was in the system, for want of a better word. And, you know, some people love to be in the system, some people don't. We just have to honor where we are. I'm not criticizing or, you know, for me, I am, but not for anyone else. Because, you know, for many years, I probably was quite happy. And, well, you know, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the physical experience of life and the material things and the beauty of the world. That continues. It's amazing. But something in me was like dying inside, as I said earlier. And it was a process. I loved my work for a while. I had ended up working in a university in Galway in 2005. When I returned to Galway, I won't go into all of the backstory yet about that, but I returned, got a job, traveled internationally, promoting the university. And then I got a job in Ireland within the university, traveling all over to schools, educating young teenagers and leaving cert students about going to college. And I loved it. I loved the freedom, which I didn't understand at the time. I loved being on the road, having my own hours, having a sense of autonomy, certain sense of autonomy. Still had a boss, but I loved the interaction with the young people. I loved seeing them light up when they talked about their passions. I loved supporting them as best I could and just seeing, just so exciting to see where they would go. And I met thousands and thousands of students over a 10-year period. So I really got a good insight at that time from 2005 to 2015 as to what it was like to be that age. And as time went on, I started, for many reasons, the environment of work started to change. So this, to me, was the start of the push to return to the wild, even though I had no idea. This was the start, and it had to be a process because otherwise I may not be alive. It could have been very harsh, and maybe that is how it happens for some people. I don't know, but I just felt such a connection with the story, and it's amazing that I was 4 or 5 or 6 when I first found that, and now I can see why, that inner spirit knowing, soul sense of the truth of it So that was the start, what I call my return to the wild. And it's a process, I'm still in it. So what happened was, and I hope by speaking here, this helps you, and I hope for many of you it resonates, and I hope it helps you if you're struggling right now and wondering, like, life, I know life has moved on and there are a lot of other issues now, but we have to face and deal with ourselves, or, you know, first and foremost, because that is where it all starts, because that is where our power is. So 2015, I think it was. So from 2012 onwards, and I think that's quite a pivotal time for a lot of people, wasn't it? The end, there was a specific, at the end of the Mayan calendar, but I had no awareness of, you know, I had dabbled in energy and healing because I suppose deep inside there was a strong calling, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And I sort of felt, Celine, no, go back into the system. This is what you're meant to be doing. This is what everybody else is doing. But it wasn't working for me. And the environment at work started to change in 2012, which I know was to start to be the catalyst for change in me. Then work began. I think it was that early, maybe 2012, 2013, I started to feel very suffocating in work. I didn't have the freedom, the structures changed, I didn't have the same freedom. And I was being sort of, I suppose, watched or supervised maybe a bit more. And I just didn't realize it, but really did not work for me. You know, in a lot of these sort of public service, civil service type jobs, there's this sort of lack of trust. That's what I kept feeling. It's a lack of trust here. I'm being watched and supervised, and this way for people to exist and work is not right. It's not healthy. I give so much when I feel passion for something, and I did, but I was giving over and beyond, and it was never enough. And I had to learn, you know, there was my own issues in there, and my own lack of boundaries, my own lack of self-worth. So that was starting. And then I think it could have been 2014, I got into a very unhealthy relationship. So that was again adding to my stress levels. The end of 2014, I had a car accident. I was so stressed at work and felt I was banging my head against a brick wall, looking for help or not even knowing what to do. I started to feel there must be something wrong with me. Even people around me seemed to be moving on in their career more than I was. I didn't want the same things. I didn't want to go up the sort of the ladder into the politics of it all. I couldn't stand that. But at the same time, I had a big mortgage. I lived on my own. I was feeling, and I probably had no real value on money at the time and on abundance. I was earning quite good money, but I was spending it as quick as I was getting it. It wasn't feeding, I wasn't being fed deeply in a soul way. So I suppose this was my attempt, as with other addictions that I dealt with. So yeah, that period, I had a car accident in November 2014. I literally went in, like almost hit a wall, but I did in a that's symbolism for it. But I was driving anyways, and because I was stressed, my attention went to the side of the road to somebody who looked very relaxed to me, and I was like, I just want to be them. And then I turned, and someone had suddenly stopped at the pedestrian crossing, and I went bang into them, and really I was shook up physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I didn't understand that. Beautiful elderly couple came along. That's a whole other story. That accident, that was just such divine intervention there. But again, trying to bring me back onto a path, or help me find my path, as opposed to bring me back. I had veered off a long time ago, maybe, or maybe it all was my path, and I suppose it all is our path. But I wasn't aligned, I suppose, with that higher purpose of who I am. So I come through the car accident at the end of 2014. I literally, I think, had a breakdown. I'm not sure. Well, I'm sure it must have been. I don't know how else to describe it, other than I was running I had been running on adrenaline with work, but now it was even on a higher level. And then 3 days after the accident, I crashed. I was so down and depressed and crying and low energy. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, you're not physically injured, Celine. You need to go back to work. And I went to my doctor and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And she just nicely, she was very supportive and said, you have been shaken up on every level. And I knew it. I think I said that to her. I said, I know. I just knew the way I was living. I was applying for loads of different jobs. I was pushing and shoving to fix a problem that could not be fixed by pushing and shoving. It was, I needed to be brought to a standstill, and I needed to then be brought back inwards into getting to know who I truly am. That all sounds lovely, maybe in theory, but it was pretty damn messy in practice, and it still is. But I wouldn't change a moment. I felt alive. As awful as it was at times, I felt alive, and I hadn't felt alive for a long time. So, as I said, I was applying for a lot of jobs. I was obviously hitting a brick wall there. I remember going for one job that I knew, in a sense, I could have got. And it was international travel again, but that would have been running away. And when I went for feedback, there was two of us down to the last two. The man who had been interviewing me said, was really very close, the two of you. But I have to say, and I asked him, well, what made the difference? And he said, she wanted it, and I didn't get the impression that you did. And he was dead right. I didn't want it. And it came across, obviously. I was doing my best to pretend that I did want it because I didn't know what else to do. So life continued. I filled in another role within the broader marketing function because that is what I worked in. Did that. It was a change, but it was still a very difficult environment because, it was being made. God, the universe, spirit, whatever, was making it difficult so that I would, come on, move out. And I was being slowly ejected, let's say. And eventually, it could have been maybe a year later, feeling really still burnt out, very lost, I find a lump on my right breast. Surprise, surprise, on the masculine side. And I ignored it for a few weeks, didn't think about cancer. And then eventually I went to breast check and gall. We went through all of that and I got the diagnosis. Breast cancer got into my lymph nodes. Yeah, shocking, shocking. I say that now, and I wouldn't normally allow myself to sit with that, but I'm doing it here because, and I have done it before, but I'm also inclined to run over and brush over. I think we all do this to survive. We believe you've got to get on with it. You've got to get on with it. No, you don't have to get on with it. You've got to be in it and with it and allow it and hold it and feel it and support it and love it and let it tell you what it needs to tell you. And that ultimately is what I did do. I didn't know it at the time. It hit me like surreal. Any of you, every one of you, I'm sure, of course, as a human being, has been given some very difficult news, whether it's someone dying, someone very sick that you love, someone leaving you, someone breaking up with you, some major crisis in your life. And yeah, I sat there as I got that news, and all I could think of and say to them is, am I going to lose my hair? Because it was the only thing I could relate to. Nothing else, I couldn't grasp. Nothing else I could grasp. It wasn't tangible. It wasn't real. It just was like, I don't even know what that is. It's just words. But I knew my hair. I had lots of long, lovely, curly hair. And I remember they said, it'll grow back. But, I didn't. Look, you don't go back. You don't go back. You just go, you just be who you are and become more of who you are and keep moving more into that. And you don't just get on with it. Because the beauty happens when you go into it and you allow it and you feel it and you cry with it, and you laugh with it, and you roar, and all of the things that you need to do. That is the process of alchemy. That is how you come out and transform. It's like a fire and you burns it all. So I went into, this is me rambling, or not rambling, but maybe just digressing and telling my story in a sort of cyclical way that I do. But this was the process of me returning to the wild, which I'm still in. So I suppose I would say to you, if you are going through something very challenging, it is, I know for sure it is happening for you. And that might sound like a very callous thing to say if you're in the midst of something so dark. And I don't mean it to be that, and I don't say it in a glib way. But I suppose what I learned from the experience of cancer was I could either be a victim of it. Now, this I'm talking about as I moved through it. I'm not saying the day I got the news, but I can tell you that I felt huge relief. And I genuinely say that after about a week. And the reason it was because I could stop. I could stop. I could actually stop. I could not keep living the way I was living. I was absolutely burnt to a shred. I had no joy in my life. I had no meaning or purpose, and that might sound a very ungrateful thing to say, because someone else might say, well, Celine, you had a nice life. You had a lovely job, and you'd bought a house and all these material things, but all these material things are nothing if you're dying inside. And, I am very grateful for the simplicity of the material things in my life now, but they are not what makes me feel alive. And I will take being down on my knees crying before with anything more than rather than just choosing just material things for the sake of it. I want to live life on all, in every sense, in every way, in every aspect of the experience. But when you choose, I will say that was the start of the return to the wild for me, because like the line, Elsa, there was a process, and I don't know, and I can't remember exactly, but they talked about how they had to prepare her and do things step by step, and maybe bring her out into the wild one day and leave her for an hour and then come and get her. And I think that was what was happening with me. So you might find in your life you get some, it sort of starts off in small. Maybe it is something like you injure yourself. Maybe you lose a job. Maybe you don't get a promotion. Maybe, things do happen. And all I would suggest at some point, I'm not saying you do this in the midst of the darkest periods of your life, but as you move through it, if there is a way that you can make some space to even hold two things. This is horrendous. I hate it. I'm in this. But what if it's happening for me? What if it's happening for me? Now, to get to that place, I believe you have to recognize that there is a greater, creative, intelligent, loving energy, force, God, whatever that is for you, a life-giving force in the universe that has given you life, that is working with you, that you are part of it, and it is trying to help you come out of the amnesia of who you really are, which is this amazing fractal spirit part of what you came from, that came down here on a mission and is, this is the journey. We forget it and then we start to wake up. So this, to me, when I really got to understand this, I said, this is the most amazing gift. I've started to remember I'm not just a piece of flesh and blood, like a robot walking around, just going through the motions. And this aspect of me that I'm beginning to remember wants the best for me, and also recognizes that I'm here on a mission to learn and grow. And maybe I know I chose that is how I view my life. I chose all of these experiences because if I'm going to come here, might as well make it a proper ride, the roller coaster. So I wasn't feeling all of that necessarily as I got diagnosed with cancer, obviously, but very quickly I did. I started to sense this relief here. What's that about? What is this giving me? I'm feeling really peaceful. I'm feeling really content. I'm feeling really secure and safe and looked after. What is that about? How is that happening? I didn't understand it, but this was the part of me. This was part of the start of the journey of returning to the wild. So when you can start to hold a little space for a question like, what if this is happening for me? Then you're starting the process of coming into your power, because you're not helpless anymore. You're not a victim. There's no one to blame. This is something greater, because you are part of this greater life force. You are the spirit here, and you've connected back to your source, to God. Whatever words, we get caught up in words, but when you've experienced it, and I've experienced, I live from that place most days until I sometimes forget and get caught up in my ego, but I do live very connected to that aspect of myself, and it's changed everything. So it gives you power when you can do that. This is the returning to the wild, the returning to the memory of you are free, because it does free you, because there is nothing that the outside world can tell you, because inside that you are free, and that you have choices. So when you start to come back to this is happening for me, you start to own the fact that you have a choice, that you have power in your life. You start to remember that you have a purpose. All of those things, but life starts to open up, and it starts to become a great adventure. Now, it's also was some of the most challenging years of my life straight after cancer, as I went to started to start to feel better, let's say, and everything went through all the treatment, and that's a whole other story I could talk about separately. And I did a lot of holistic work, and a lot of spiritual work, and a lot of healing work, and a lot of energy work, and all of that. But the most challenging time was I had got a taste of the wild. It was like someone had left me out there for a short while, and then I was told, "Oh, you're better now. You can come back." And that's what I started to hear. And I say this with the greatest respect for people around me, because I understand that "Oh, that's great. You can go back to work. You can go back to your life." And I was like, "Oh my God, go back to my life." I've just managed to start remembering that this is not who I am, and it wasn't fulfilling me. Now, I know many people, so again, I'm very careful. It's not even careful. I suppose I want to say again that I speak from my experience only. I'm not saying this is yours. I'm not saying this is anyone else's. This is purely mine. There are many people I know who've gone through much greater challenges than me, and have gone back to maybe a life, and that is what was meant for them. That is their path, and that maybe is where they had fulfillment. I can't comment on that. That is everybody's own unique story. So I only say this, that I just want to emphasize it on this episode. I say this from my experience. So that was the most challenging time, that sort of transition. And what I will say, just to finish up today, because I've made this a very long recording, longer than I thought, that I have been on that journey into the wild since then. I never and never will go back to being captured or domesticated or limited, or I am on that path to live as a fully sovereign, free human being, a spirit in a body here. And I would say that to you, if you embrace that in your life, nothing can stop you. No, because whatever ups and downs come, they're going to come. And what is the alternative? I often thought about that. What was the alternative? Just give in and say I'm a victim of this and I have no power? I knew I felt it firing up in me. nothing was going to stop it, even though at times I tried and I fought and maybe I should go back and maybe I should do this. And it's been a challenging and amazing time since 2016. Some of the greatest, just huge learning, like just jumping off the deep end. As someone said to me, just have a leap of faith, follow your heart, follow that fire, follow that passion, follow that wild woman, get to know her. You're not, what else are you here for? And that is what I have done. And that is, I don't know if I can say I'm living free, but that journey of little else of the line that I remember from when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, born free, then domesticated, captured, then returning to the wild and living free. And I think that is the human journey. So that's my sharing today, a little of how cancer was a part of the catalyst, because I've often said this, I think I'm quite a slow learner. I must be between a car accidents, horrendous relationships, burnout, job, everything. I needed to be stopped in my tracks. I was going 5,000 miles an hour for a long time, and like I'm sure many of you. And the other thing I'll mention before as I finish, and again, I don't know if this used to come up for me sometimes. I suppose comparison, which, as they say, comparisons are odious. We are each unique individuals and on a unique journey. Why would we compare? But I often did and used to think, gosh, there's people working longer hours than me, and why are they not sick? And all of that. Now, firstly, I know it's because they're not me. And if God spirit is going to come down here and have fun, it's going to do it in a lot of different forms. It's not going to come down to be sort of the same, this homogenous group of people. So I understand that now, but so just in case you're going through something difficult and comparing yourself and saying, well, so and so is doing this and they're not feeling like I am, they're not you. But also the other side of it is, someone reminded me as well, like, you have so much. I had sort of cut myself off from the life-giving source, even though it was always there, but my full powerful connection to God, to source, to spirit. I had sort of been, I don't know what the right word is, but maybe I wasn't completely cut off, or I wouldn't have been alive, but I definitely wasn't tuned in and aligned and tapped in. So I was running off the energy, a low energy, and it was all going out. And I didn't have sort of like a lot of, because I'd isolated myself a bit. That was my way of dealing with things that had happened to me. So I didn't have a lot of energy and love coming in. Even though my family loved me, I wouldn't have seen them a lot. So I think that's the other side of it. There has to be a balance, and you can't keep making withdrawals from your energy bank without depositing. And that's been a big lesson for me in terms of giving and receiving, and learning to receive and learning to say no, all of those things. So I'll leave you on that note today. I hope you got something from listening to this episode. I hope it resonates with you in some way. If anyone out there listening, if you are going through cancer, or you know someone who's going through cancer, I'm really sorry. It is so difficult when you're in it. In one way I say it was a relief. It was a relief I could stop, but it wasn't a relief I had cancer. My God, it wasn't. But it was what I had to go through. So however and whatever you are dealing with right now, I really do wish you well. And I would just leave you with that question. What if this is happening for you? And if that is too much to even entertain, even just to say, what do I want to choose here? What do I want to choose here? Do I have a choice? What's the choice? You always have a choice. And let it be a choice that is bringing you back to the wild, to your true, wild, free, beautiful nature. Thank you so much for listening today. And I look forward to meeting you on the next episode, where I'll be interviewing another amazing lady. We've it arranged, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you'll enjoy listening. Thank you so much. Take care for now. Bye.